The night shift had ended hours ago, but the white janitor still scrubbed the marble floors of the skyscraper, her knees aching against the cold tile. The CEO stormed out of his glass office, his suit perfect, his temper not. He glared at her bucket of soapy water blocking his path. "Didn't I tell you to be gone before I leave?" he barked. She scrambled to move it, but her wet gloves slipped and the water sloshed across his polished shoes. He froze, looked down at the stain, then up at her face. "You think that's funny?" She shook her head. "No, sir, I'm sorry, I'll clean it," he sneered. "You'll clean it all right on your knees like the mutt you are. Crawl to that bucket and mop it up." The security guards nearby shifted uneasily, but said nothing. The janitor stared at him, her eyes full of quiet disbelief. The CEO smirked. "I said crawl," his voice echoed down the empty hall, and she did, slowly, tears burning her eyes. Not from fear, but from humiliation. He laughed under his breath before walking past her, leaving muddy footprints behind. A few guards looked away ashamed, but no one helped. The next morning he arrived at work to chaos. Phones ringing, alarms beeping, panicked voices filling the halls. His assistant rushed toward him. "Sir, all accounts are frozen. The board's in an emergency meeting. The company's under federal investigation." "What?" he roared. "What are you talking about?" She stammered. "Someone exposed everything. The fake invoices, offshore accounts, falsified contracts. They're saying an insider leaked it all. And the name on the report." She swallowed hard before whispering, "It was her. The janitor." The CEO's face drained of color as the words hit him like a blow. "What do you mean, the janitor?" he shouted. "That woman barely speaks. She's nobody." His assistant's voice trembled. "Sir, she's not who you think she is. She's been working undercover for 3 months with the corporate crime division." He froze the air, leaving his lungs. His assistant slid a folder across. The table inside were photos, reports, official seals stamped by federal agents. "She's an undercover investigator sent to audit suspicious companies tied to fraud and money laundering. She'd been gathering evidence for weeks, and last night after, you humiliated her." She submitted the final report with video proof of everything. The CEO stumbled back, gripping the edge of his desk. "She recorded me." The assistant nodded quietly. "Every word, sir. Every laugh, every insult. You forced a federal agent to crawl on camera." He dropped into his chair, his mind spinning. She wasn't just a janitor. She was the storm that had been waiting to strike. He turned toward the glass windows overlooking the city he once owned, now watching as black cars filled. The street below, agents in suits were already walking through the lobby, their badges gleaming under the morning light. Moments later, the doors burst open and 2 officers stepped in. "Sir, you're under arrest for corporate fraud, tax evasion, and workplace harassment." He tried to protest, but his voice broke. "I didn't know who she was." From the back of the room, a figure stepped forward wearing a clean suit, her badge clipped to her belt. The janitor, no longer trembling, no longer small. She looked at him calmly. "You didn't need to know who I was. You just needed to treat me like a person." The CEO's wrists were bound with cold metal cuffs as he stared at the woman who had once been on her knees before him. She stepped closer, each word slow, deliberate, measured. "You remember the night you fired a whole cleaning crew for missing a fingerprint on your glass table?" she asked softly. He frowned, struggling to speak. "I don't—" She cut him off. "You should, because one of those janitors was my father." His eyes widened as she continued, her voice steady, but her hands trembling slightly. "He worked for you for 10 years, loyal, kind, proud of his job, until you humiliated him in front of the entire staff. You told him men like him didn't belong in a company like this. That night he came home and said maybe you were right. The next week he was gone for good." The CEO's breath caught horror dawning on his face. I didn't know." She nodded. "No, you didn't. Because men like you, never. Look at the faces you step on to climb higher. But I remembered yours every single day." She turned to the agents, her tone firm. "Take him away." As they led him toward the door, he stopped, glancing back over his shoulder. "You destroyed everything I built." She looked at him, her gaze like steel. "No, I just showed the world what you built it on: lies, fear, and cruelty." He was escorted out into a swarm of reporters, flashing cameras, shouting questions, drowning his last words. The woman stood by the window, overlooking the same city that had once seemed untouchable. Her reflection looked different now, stronger. Freer later that week, headlines filled every screen, billion-dollar fraud exposed by undercover janitor turned investigator. She closed her laptop, leaned back in her chair and whispered quietly to herself, "Justice doesn't wear suits, sometimes it wears gloves and cleans up other people's messes." Days later, the building stood empty, the marble floors she once scrubbed, now collecting dust. The nameplate with the CEO's name had been stripped from the wall, replaced by a simple notice from the federal department. The empire he had built on greed and humiliation was gone. Just like that. The woman walked through the lobby one last time, her gloves tucked neatly into her coat pocket. Agents nodded to her as she passed, but she hardly noticed. She paused at the spot where he'd once ordered her to crawl, the memory flickering through her mind. She knelt again for just a moment. Not in shame, but in victory, pressing her fingers to the floor and whispering softly, "This time I kneel for strength, not for fear." Outside reporters still crowded the steps, asking the same question again and again. "How did you do it?" She smiled faintly, adjusting the badge on her belt. "I just cleaned house," she said before walking into the sunlight. The investigation she started had uncovered enough evidence to dismantle every corrupt deal he'd ever signed. Within weeks, employees, once too afraid to speak, finally stepped forward. The company's stolen funds were redirected into rebuilding the lives he'd ruined. Scholarships launched in her father's name, doors opening for people he would have never hired. As she looked out at the skyline, one last time she felt something lift inside her, not pride but peace. The city seemed brighter, freer. Her father's voice echoed softly in her memory. "Always do your job with pride, even if no one's watching." She smiled through tears, knowing he would have been proud of her, not just for exposing the powerful, but for standing tall when they tried to make her small. If this story moved, you share it, so others never forget that one selfless act can rewrite a destiny in ways no one sees coming.